What's up guys and welcome back. So the first thing I want to do on this car is to make the rad shroud. I figured this would be the best portion before we start taking the car completely apart to do our fuel lines, boost controller lines, and the rest of the lines that are needed for this engine bay. So steps to making a custom rad shroud. What I've done is I've taken my brand new CSF rad here and I've cut all the top stock mounts off. The reason I've done that is because I want to do the same thing that I did on my previous bug eye and make it as clean as possible. So we've modified a fan rad shroud so that way it holds the aftermarket fans I've purchased directly to the CSF rad. The rad shroud is now going to cover all of the top bumper components here. It will cover the top part of the car and also the top of the rad, but also bend over to completely cover any of the fan components. All right, so there is no off the shelf that I can buy for this, which means I'm going to have to make it. Now, simplest way to make this is with Bristol board and some scissors. So first step of that is piecing them all together, taking multiple pieces, stapling them, taping them to build your first stencil. The first stencil then gets copied onto a secondary stencil just so that it's cleaner, it's one piece. And then from there we can trace that onto a piece of 060 aluminum, make the bend, drill the holes, and cut out the slots for areas like this that are needed. So I'm 6'5", and being tall is awesome, except for when it comes to working on engine bays. So, jack the car up, let's get back to it. So once you have taped up all your pieces and you've created your overall rad shroud, it should look something like this. Now, it's not very pretty with all this tape and multiple different layers on it, so you want to make it into one piece. So what I've done is I've traced it onto another piece, so you can see that this is nice and clean now. Now I've also at the top there, you can see I've added that 1-inch part. That's gonna be my bend down, so that way I can hold it to the rad and hold it in place. Now, let's test fit and see how it does. Right, so after the first test fit, it's not too bad. There's a few things we're gonna change. Just, you wanna be as precise as possible when you're working on the paper component because it's a lot easier to cut paper than it is metal. So as you can see here, I've got it in place, taped up at the front just to hold it. I've marked out my bolt locations on where they're going to be. The tape in the front is just holding it down. You can see I've marked it. It's a little bit too big here. There's a few things like that when it becomes metal will become an issue. I've taped on a few pieces that I just want to get that much closer. They're not big gaps at all, but here and here I want to straighten this up to a straight corner. That was about a millimeter gap and I just want to close it, and then you see I'm going to trim a little bit of this edge right here. Like I said, you want to be as precise as possible when you're working on this because when you go to the metal, it will make it that much easier for you. All right, so round 2 came out awesome. Cleaned up some of the lines, added in a few different areas. We have it fully bolted up, so should be good. So as you can see, we even added the front bolts in here just to make sure that everything does line up correctly. We've tightened up the gap here a little bit. Everything's looking like it should. Now, right here, we might be a little bit big, but I'd much rather know when I get the metal in that it is too big and have to sand that down, because like I said, it is aluminum, it is pretty easy to work with, but other than that, everything seems to be lining up pretty great. So next stage is to trace this onto metal and then cut it up. Went out and bought my metal today. I purchased 2 of these. So this is each piece that I need for the rad shroud. Now, the reason I bought 2 is I live about half an hour away. It costs $43 for both pieces, and if I messed up and needed to go get another piece, I'd be spending the same amount in gas just to get a second piece anyways, and I can always use it for other projects, so figure I might as well get 2. So the next step is to trace your template onto your metal piece. Now you can see that you have one side that has a protective coat and the other side that has the bare metal. I prefer to draw on the protected side because that way if you have any bits that are stuck to your jigsaw, because that's what we're going to use to cut it, it will show because it'll start peeling it away, and then you can prevent that as quick as possible. So as you can see right here, I have my template laid on top of the protected side of the film, and once we remove that away, you can see I've drawn it out. Now, I prefer to use a pen. The reason is some people prefer to use a Sharpie marker. However, when you do that, it makes a thicker line. We're trying to be as precise as possible, so when you use a pen, that's that much more precision in comparison to the thick aspect of a marker. All right, so we got it all set up here. You can see I got it clamped. I also have about half of this side hanging off the table. The reason is I don't want to cut into my table. However, I do want to cut into this masonite. This stuff's really cheap. It's like $20 for a 4x8 piece. So it's not very expensive. However, it does help when you're cutting thinner material. You can see how thin this is. So it does jump around when you try to cut it with a jigsaw, where if you put the backer piece on, it makes it a lot cleaner of a cut.
So let me redefine you, and you can see the tide move, just like tears in the eyes do. And when you're feeling oh baby, I'll be right here, between the sea and silence. So breathe easy, my dear, you can find sunshine in the rain. I will come running when you call my name.
Alright, so my friend is super paranoid because of the whole corona thing going on. So I wasn't even allowed in his house, so I couldn't record what it is he was doing. But we've bent this up. So we've created the 90-degree edge, and then the custom edging here I did just by stapling 2 pieces of paper together on my card to figure out the exact angle. So now what we need to do is test fit it, and then if it's good, basically just finish up filing the edges, sanding everything down so it's nice and smooth, so that you don't have any kerf marks from the jigsaw. All right, so I am super stoked on the way this looks. The fitment is crazy tight on it. So at this point, I think what we're gonna do is we're going to start filing everything up, sanding it, rounding over the corners like this, just so that we don't have any sharp edges, and then basically start drilling the holes to do the final assembly portion on.
All day and night you keep me up, non-stop, I'm so done, yeah, I'm giving you more than enough, oh my love, I'm so done, yeah. I blame myself, I broke my own heart loving you. You cut me up and now I'm bleeding from the truth. You left me helpless, now I don't.
Alright, so we are now all done. We've done all our final aspects such as sanding, filing, and also drilling all of the holes that are needed. So what we're gonna do now is let's bolt it up and do a final check and make sure that everything's good. So I'm really stoked on how this came out. You can see front is nice and tight. All right, we ended up going with a clip on the farthest side and then bolts in the middle, which is how the stock setup is. You can see on the back side here, we've got it fully bolted up right here with the 4 bolts, 2, 3, 4. It looks really good. I'm super stoked on how it came out. The only thing we had to change once it was in metal is we did have to notch this area out because you can see it was scratching a little bit, and also it wouldn't allow this plate to get tight enough to the rad. So we did have to notch this out a bit, but even with that, I could have cut this a little bit shorter. However, I wanted to bring this portion out as far as possible. I think visually it just looks better. So overall, I'm super impressed. So if you liked this video, you learned something, you thought it was decent, you want to see where this car goes, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and see y'all soon.